So you're back. Nice to see you, champ. Let's continue our journey. Before moving further, let me ask you one question. Have you ever reused something in your life? If yes, give me a high five. Before exploring the detailed explanation, let's go through an example for our better understanding. Suppose you have chilies in your hand. You want to convert it into chili powder. What will you do? You will put chilies into the mixer and you will just switch on the mixer and you will set some points to mix. Moving ahead. In the previous example, the mixer acts like a function. You can use the same mixer to do this operation multiple times. You will not use different mixtures every time. Functions and subroutines in programming languages also work in the same way. A function and subroutine is a piece of code in a larger program. It performs a specific task. A function is more or less the same thing as a segment of code you create yourself, and that can be used whenever you want it. They are a way to flex your code, so you don't end up writing 100 lines of code all in one block. As your applications grow, you need to break them into separate logical units. Another way to break up an application is by using either functions or subroutines. Functions and subroutines operate similarly but have one key difference. In functions, there is a return type, i.e. value is returned, while a subroutine is used when a desired task is needed, but no value is returned. Suppose that you have to use the program by adding two numbers 20 times in your program, then it is not a good idea to write the code of adding two numbers again and again. In this case, function and subroutines play a very important role. So let's go through the reasons for using functions and subroutines in VB.NET. Reducing repetition of code. Break down difficult problems into simpler pieces. The size of the code reduces. Reduces chances of error. Do you think this much is sufficient? Let me tell you, this is one of the most important concepts in programming. Before we move any further ahead, we need to learn the syntax. The syntax for the function statement consists of the name, parameter and the body of the function. So basically, the role of function name is to point out the name of the function. And in the same way, parameter list is used to identify the list of the parameters. Return type identifies the data type of the variable the function returns. For example, create a function called doConvert. This time we go for the syntax of subroutines. The syntax for the substatement consists of the name, parameter and the body of a subroutine. Subname indicates the name of the sub. And the parameter list specifies the list of the parameters. For example, invoking a subroutine can occur with parameters. I hope you are familiar with functions and subroutines. But now is the correct time to explore something new. Basically, in this topic, we will be understanding the components of it. So let's start with an example. Imagine functions as your trusted people. You can call them when you need something done which that guy knows exactly how to do. The function that makes the call is known as the calling function. In short, we can say the caller. To call a function, the first step will be to give the function's name and then pass any data in the argument list following the function name. Function name data passed to functions. Function name identifies the called function. The argument list passes data to the function. For example, if you made a function called addNum that returned value, you could use the function as follows. If you observe the above example, it would cause the following to happen. The add num would be called, passing int num1 and int num2. The add num would add the values of int num1 and int num2 to produce its return value, the sum. And finally, when add num exits, its return value would be stored in the variable int sum. To call a subroutine, the first step will be to give the subroutine's name and then pass any data in the argument list following the subroutine name. Subroutine name parameters. The parameter is a comma-separated list of input values. The input values must be of the same type as those in the subroutine's parameter list. A subroutine will be expecting one or more parameters for calling. This increases the reusability and flexibility of a subroutine. To understand in a better way, let's go through the example. We can also call a subroutine in two ways. Or. Let's imagine you have a grinder that will grind anything that you pass onto it. Suppose you had fixed some amount of rice in the grinder. So what will be the next step? It will start to grind the rice. Moving on to the next step. Come along. In programming, we create functions that do the things we need. Say add, subtract, multiply, or print the stuff that you pass onto it. Then we pass on stuff upon which the function will operate and return us the results. This process of passing the stuff to be processed is referred to as passing an argument in programming. In VB.NET, you can pass an argument by value or by reference, i.e., passing by value or passing by reference. If I were to pass you some physical thing by value, I would hand it to you. Am I correct? So when you pass an argument by value, the subroutine or function sees only a copy of the argument. Even if the subroutine or function changes it, the changes aren't permanent. The benefit of passing arguments by value is that the argument values are isolated from the subroutine or function, and only the program in which they are declared can change their values. In VB.NET, you declare the value parameters using the byval keyword. Let's go through the example to demonstrate the concept of byval. This would produce the result, 1. In the given example, module is named as funds. We have declared a string value as an integer. When the integer value is passed to Visual Basic 1, its value is only changed inside the Visual Basic 1 subroutine. In main, the value is unchanged. If you observe the program, it shows that there is no change in the values, though they had been changed inside the function. If I were to pass you some physical thing by reference, I would tell you where it is, or maybe use my finger to point to it. Am I correct? If you pass the parameters by ref, their values can be changed by calling a subroutine or function. Passing by reference means that the memory address of the variable is passed to the function. If the value of the argument is modified, the argument would now have the new value, losing the original value it had. This technique is referred to as passing an argument by reference. In VB.NET, you declare the reference parameters using the byref keyword. Let's go through the example to demonstrate the concept of byref. This would produce the result, 10. In the given example, module is named as funds. We have declared a string value as an integer. In Visual Basic 2, the reference to the integer is copied, so when the value is changed, it is reflected in the main sub. The value is changed to 10 in the main subroutine after Visual Basic 2 returns. We have finally completed this chapter. I hope so, champ. Now you are aware of functions and subroutines. Now let's get into some of the important points related to this chapter. Come along. A function and subroutine is a piece of code in a larger program. In functions, there is a return type, while in a subroutine no value is returned. Understanding the difference between byval and byref is important. Byval is often useful for references and also values. Byref is typically more useful for values because you more often need to change the original values.